vulnerable, courageous empath.
Hi, everyone. This is Heather Vickery, and you've tuned in to the Brave Files podcast. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here with us today. Oh, my goodness. Today's guest, Amy Stevens, is an out and proud and oh so unapologetically herself woman. I adore her. We met on Twitter, which is, as you know, if you've been hanging around for a while, my new favorite place to hang out. Amy is a trans woman full of spunk and humor, and she has gone through one of the toughest but most rewarding transformations possible. From staunch, God-fearing Republican and Mormon to a trans comic working to get a degree in mental health, Amy has reworked her life to be as authentic as possible. She's the host of a podcast called Transformation Tuesday, and she talked with us about her journey to self and why she wouldn't really change anything that led her to exactly where she is at this moment. Before we start the episode, I want to invite you to go on a little journey with me. Who wants to go on a brave journey with me? I've taken on a personal challenge called My Brave Today, where I am going to share a live video, oh my God, a live video every day in December telling you about the things that I did each day that felt brave to me. If you've been hanging around for a while, you already know that I am not a fan of video. I do not like it. I can go on stage, I can lead workshops, I can speak, I can train, but I like that human interaction. I do not like to just talk to a video camera and not know if there's somebody on the other side. It feels very uncomfortable and I really do not like it. I am not a fan, but I decided on this challenge as a way to get out of my comfort zone and, quite frankly, to get out of my own way when it comes to video, because video's not going away. So I've decided to embrace it in the only way I know how, bravely. I invite you to accept this challenge with me. Share a video each day in the month of December with your brave thing from that day. And listen, our brave things may vary differently day to day. Maybe you were a guest on a podcast. Maybe you decided to get out of bed and take a shower for the first time in days. Maybe your brave thing is setting a boundary or asking a question, sending an email. Could be anything. And my guess is, even for me, some days my brave thing will be big and some days it'll be small or seemingly small. It's always a fascinating thing, right? Because we're revolutionizing everyday bravery. Because when we choose bravely on purpose, what happens, right? We choose bigger, we win bigger, and it's contagious. So I invite you to accept this challenge with me and share a video each day in the month of December with your brave thing. I'm going to be posting my videos across platforms. I'll be on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with the hashtag MyBraveToday. If you want to learn more and join me, visit mybravetoday.com and sign up for the challenge. Why do you have to sign up for the challenge? Well, you don't have to, not really. But if you register for it, I'll be able to track you on your journey, be a cheerleader, help you stay accountable, and you get to do the same thing for me. We will have a hashtag that we can follow on Twitter and on Instagram, and I'll send out some check-in emails throughout the month to see how you're doing. We'll signal boost each of your things if you want. If you don't want to be signal boost, that's okay. You can let me know. I'm really excited. I'm really nervous. It feels like a big deal. I'm doing this all at the very last minute. The decision to make this public and to invite you all to do the My Brave Today challenge with me was very new. I thought I was going to do it just for myself until literally a couple of days ago when I went and bought the URL and I started putting this together. It would be a lot of fun. I'd be honored to do this with you and celebrate your brave journey with you. So what do you say? Will you join me?
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show.
Hi, friends. You know, transformation of any kind is quite frankly brave AF. First, deciding that one wants to transition, and then taking the necessary actions to do so. And today's guest is very familiar with the struggles and joys of transformation, and she's here to share her story with us. And, I almost never read a guest's bio word for word, but I love Amy Stevens' bio, and so I just want to share it with you. Amy Stevens is a woman who happens to be transgender, and since coming out, she has found her voice as a podcaster, a comic, and is currently working towards her mental health counseling degree at the State University of New York in Rockport? I can't say that right. Rockport. I can't read my own typing. Amy lives in Rochester, New York with her ex-wife, daughter, and kid. And she's entertained and educated audiences in New York, Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, and London, England. I think she's cool. I'm pretty excited to chat with Amy. We have been social internet stalking one another for months now. So, Amy, welcome to the Brave Files.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Heather. This is fantastic. I know we started talking about this at the beginning of the year, and here we are rounding out 2021, and we're finally making this happen.
I know. Isn't that crazy? We get these tips and tricks, and we go, oh, I love you. I love what you're doing. I want to talk to you. But somehow, I feel like the universe always has our back. Like, we're going to have a different conversation now than maybe if we had jumped on it at the beginning of the year. It's been a hell of a year, 2021.
Coming out of 2020, I thought it couldn't get I didn't think it could get any worse or any more exciting, but yeah, the universe proved me wrong.
That's what I'm hearing from everybody. We're like, wait, what the actual fuck is happening? But I like that you said worse or more exciting. What's been more exciting for you this year?
The more exciting part has actually been getting back out and seeing people again.
Yeah.
I really feel that the pandemic stunted my growth as a woman who happens to be transgender, because I had started coming out, we get into this in 2017, 2018. I fully come out. I'm doing, my hormones replacement therapy. I'm starting, comedy, and I'm making friends. And then, less than 2 years later, the world is shut down. And so I just feel like my social growth was stunted. And getting back into my life and reconnecting with, my comedy friends and my friends in my mental health counseling degree program has been fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, there have been some real joys, although the pandemic taught me that I am not the extrovert that I thought I was. I am totally an introvert. And so it's been good to go out and do fun things again, but I didn't fully miss all the required socialness of life. Like, I was like, oh, that was fine. But I can imagine if you have reinvented yourself or reconnected with yourself or finally just started to share yourself and you're wanting to get out into the world, that would totally suck.
Yeah, it totally did suck. And I figured out I'm still an extrovert in certain situations, but people mistake me for an extrovert all the time. If I go to a social gathering or party, I'm going to find one or two people to have super long conversations with. I'm not going to be the life of the party. And even last night, I finished up a comedy set and I was standing talking with some friends in the lobby of the club. And, and I had a couple fans that came over, but they had to approach me. I wasn't comfortable going to them. And so I think, people like you and I who have some sort of social media platform and that we speak from now, oh, you guys are super extroverted. Well, no, we're not.
No.
We just pick and choose our places where to put ourselves out there, but I'm more than comfortable to have a quiet night in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, me too. But it's interesting you say that. There are a lot of introverted podcasters. What I think always surprises people is introverted comics. And I just recently both saw Cameron Esposito live, and then also she was a keynote speaker at the She Podcast conference. And she talked about how much anxiety she has and how shy she is. So I do want to share at least a little bit of your personal transformation story with folks, but we'll get there. So I'd love to hear how that affects you, or if it does, as a comic. Were you always a comic? Is this a new thing in your life?
This is a new thing in my life. I started improv classes just before I started coming out. And when I started my gender exploration, as I call it, I mean, I've always known I was a little bit different from everybody else, but when I really started embracing it, I started going to improv as my old self, and then about 5-6 months into 2017, I was experimenting with gender, and I was labeling it gender fluid at the time, and I emailed the fantastic woman who does the improv classes here some of the improv classes here in Rochester. I'm like, hey, oh, by the way, I'm gender fluid. Do you mind if I come, sometime as Amy? And she's like, you come as ever you want to. So there's actually a while where some months I would go as Amy, sometimes I would go as my old self.
Love that.
And it was interesting because a couple of the people in the class, they're like, we're starting to take bets on who you're going to show up as. And then over time, it just became more and more Amy. And so now it's only Amy. But it's been an interesting transition.
I always find it really fascinating, and I see this pattern in folks a lot, and in myself as well. There's something about deciding to make a big-ass decision or a big change, a big transformation, where we go, well, let's just do a bunch of it. Let's just do a lot. Because when I came out and finally got a divorce, I closed a thriving business. Like, I burned it all to the ground. I was like, fuck it. We're just going to change everything. And it sounds like maybe you were feeling a little of that. Like, let's just go all the way in.
Yeah, there's people ask me about, business and life. There's not one part of my life that my gender, my transition hasn't touched. So it's been a very life-encompassing experience, but I also look at this, making this big transition in my late 40s. I feel the universe has given me this wonderful gift to embrace who I am with all my prior life experiences. And, if you look at the statistics, 0.6, 0.7% of folks identify as transgender or gender diverse, and then a smaller percentage of us even get this gift to do it in our middle ages and take all this experience and, pay it forward at the same time, but also look back at the people who made my journey possible.
I love that perspective so much, Amy. This gift of having lived this whole life, and there's so much knowledge. I love being in my 40s. I think we're close to the same age. I'll be 47 in December, actually just a couple days after this episode airs. And I call it midlife catharsis. Like, it's just fucking great. I zero fucks to give and all of that. But a lot of folks would assume, and of course we should never assume, but that, that you wish you had been able to be your true self earlier in your life. And so let's kind of dig in on that. You were in your 40s when you started to transition. At what point for you did you know that you were Amy?
When did I know I was first Amy? That's an interesting question, because when I look back at my life, I can fill in all the gaps now with this great 20/20 hindsight. And it would be really, really easy for me to say, yeah, I knew then, I knew here. Mm-hmm. But I have stories that dot my childhood from like the age of 2 and 3, from doing everything super femme with my mom, but then finding hockey in my early years and becoming an athlete at some level. And hockey's been a fairly constant thing in my life since I've been 3 years old. And that's a very masculine-dominated world.
Yes, but girls like hockey.
Especially now, yeah. Girls hockey's become very popular, and I'm thankful for that. And so I can look back at my life and say, okay, I could have known there, I could have known here. And then I was in a big car accident my junior year of high school, and I had 6-7 weeks at home all by myself, and I got to wear my sister's clothes because I was really lanky as a kid, so I was taller than her. But yet, at the same time, because we were similar build in the midsection, I could wear her clothes. And in fact, I stretched out one of her bathing suits so bad that she wasn't able to wear it the next summer.
Oh, no.
And I told her, I'm like, do you remember that swimming suit that you had that was the blue and stripes with the elastic strap? She's like, yeah. I'm like, when I came out to her, yeah, you're welcome. But for her, that just tied it all together. She's like, well, why didn't you tell me then? Because I'm like, well, it was 1989. Nobody was coming out as gay or transgender in 1989. So I can look back at all those things over my childhood and say, yeah, I knew I was a little bit different, but I also thought it was a fetish because of my religious upbringing and the way I looked at religion and God. And that plays into joining the Mormon church later in life.
Oh, later in life. You
I
went
didn't-
Mormon later in life.
27 years old after my
Holy
first
hell.
divorce. Yeah, exactly. That's a whole nother story, too.
That's its own podcast.
Yeah, it really is. But then in the mid-90s, I was a junior or senior at the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh, and had the afternoons off like a lot of college kids did, and I would watch the Jerry Springer show. And Jerry would have on trans women, and that's when I put it together. That's the first time I said, I want to be her. I want to be Amy. And I knew at that time, but I also knew from my childhood that I'd asked my parents numerous times when I was growing up, what would my name have been if I was born a girl? And of course, the answer was Amy. And so there was never a doubt that. So I kind of going back to what I said a little bit ago about having all this life experience. Now I look at it as I am on the outside now. So Amy is the outward facing appearance, as well as she was always in there. Now I brought her out.
Yeah.
But he's still inside of me. You know, Amy and him have just switched places.
Yeah, I love that. Because there are lots of parts to us. We're never just one thing. We are we have lots of different feelings and things. And you two had to work together, both versions of you, to survive, right? Like,
Yeah.
you needed one another.
Yeah, we needed one another, and we still do, and that's why, we were speaking before, you're like, oh, I'm not going to ask you your dead name, but yet I don't refer to it as my dead name. I understand why trans people do, but I look at my former name as it was an important decision for my parents to name me that, as well as Amy, and so I refer to it as my old name because it's so jarring I've heard this from other parents too. That term dead name is just so jarring for them.
Fair enough.
So I'm like, okay, and I'm not going to put this out there, but Stevens is actually my legal middle name. I just use that for social media purposes in my comedy. But the interesting thing is Steven was also my middle name prior to, and it's my dad's name. So I wanted to keep my dad as a portion of my name and my identity because he's been such an important person in my life.
I love that. I really do. So you'd indicated that you'd been previously married, got a divorce, then joined the Mormon church.
What a ride.
Fascinated by that. Feels you're the second person I've had on the show who did that as an adult. And it feels almost like self-punishment. Like I'm going to cause myself as much trauma as possible because I don't deserve to be healthy or happy because I'm different than what I'm told. But I don't want to assume that or put that on you. But was there any element of that? Because I'm like, who the fuck?
Yeah, who joins the Mormon church at age 27? Well,
when you know that you're transgender or queer or that there's something, right?
Well, yeah, so I knew I was different, but yet at the same point, I grew up Lutheran in Minnesota. At the time, I thought I was a Republican and, doing all those things, right? And the interesting thing about that is, so I met my ex-wife in 1993 in college. We dated, we got engaged in 1997, we got married, and then by 98, divorced. But in that time, in between 93 and 98, my entire family had relocated to Phoenix, Arizona from the Midwest. I grew up in Minnesota, just outside of St. Paul. So my family orphaned me in college.
Oh.
And yeah, looking back on it, it's probably more traumatic than what I gave it credit for in real time.
Sure.
So after our divorce, I ended up moving to Arizona as a 27-year-old with, a few friends, some family there, but not a really good social network around me. And I ended up making friends with a Mormon guy. Him and I texted him yesterday. We're still friends.
That's nice.
And so I ended up making friends with Mormons and then all of a sudden I became a flight attendant for the old America West Airlines, and I had a roommate. She was a girl, and guess what? I could fit in her clothes. And so when she was on the road, I was in her closet in more ways than one. And so I was able to wear her clothes, but then again, this idea of the fetish keeps coming back, and I'm like, oh, the Mormons, they're really strict. They have they have their temple, their wards, or their congregations for single people. I could meet a nice girl, and then if I can fix myself, I can put this away and
Fix myself. Oh,
yep, pray away the gay, pray away the trans. But at the same time, in the 90s, we're also still coming out of the AIDS epidemic of the 80s. And, I had this idea in my head. It's like, okay, I can't be trans because I want to have kids. I'm attracted to women. I don't want to date men. And that's what so I had
Right.
all these societal expectations playing around in my head. And so I thought joining the Mormons would provide me that sturdy male framework for me to embrace, to get a wife, have kids, and it worked for a while, but here I am.
So then the next time you got married, was that through the Mormon church?
Yeah, so I met my ex, my most current ex, we'll just call her. I don't name names. So
Absolutely. Fair enough.
I respect, the anonymity there of them for either one of them. And that's even people who date me too. I'm like, I'm not going to name you in my podcast. I'm not going to name you in comedy.
Yeah.
I respect you that much, at least for that. And so, yeah, we met while I was joined in the church. We were friends for 10 months. We dated for a month, engaged for 4 months, and we were married for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fast, but that's the way it goes in the Mormon church. I know that.
Yeah, we had a great 18 years. We had a great marriage, and the only thing that ended our marriage was me coming out.
That had to be challenging. Now you have 2 children?
Yep, 2 children.
So what was that like? Can you share with me that moment of reckoning? Because I can remember it for myself, and it's not the same. Of course, I was married for a decade, 4 kids, and came out of the closet, but it's not the same. I can't quite imagine coming out as trans, but that moment of reckoning where you go, I have to do this. I have to do this. What happened?
Deep sigh.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of 3 or 4 moments. I started coming out in 2017, and that was purely a social transition early on. So what I mean by that is I was exploring my gender, presenting as female, as what we refer to it in the trans and gender diverse communities. Very part-time because of work, life, and everything else at the time. But it was early 2018, that spring, where I'm like, I keep playing this over. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do it? And then I read a old research paper about cross-dressers, and they examined their lives. And just to skip ahead to the biggest regrets, the 70-year-old, 80-year-old, I would call them trans, but at the article.
At the time, they said cross-dressers.
Cross-dressers. Yeah. Their biggest regret was not starting hormone replacement therapy, not acting on that sooner. And I'm like, at this point in 2018, I'm 46 years old. And I'm like, the universe has put this here for me now that I have to grasp this. And I knew in that moment I had to do it. So, July 2018, my ex and I are talking. She knows I'm going on hormones, but I'm like, hey, I can still do this gender fluid thing. But then, in early fall, it's like I knew the train had left the station and there was no going back. And I remember one morning my ex reached over, put her hand on my chest, and next thing I heard was crying. And she's like, your boobs are getting really big, and I know what's coming. And that was a tough moment. And then later again in 2018 at Thanksgiving, we had a really nice moment as a family. The 4 of us were on our bed, and we were singing songs. But at the same time, I was crying because I knew the end of our family as we knew it in that moment was coming to an end. And I really haven't spoken about that much. This is the first place where I've spoken about this publicly, and that's a heavy moment. And even the song, I know my ex and I have both taken it off of our Spotify playlist because we just can't listen to it anymore.
Wow. What song is that?
If I remember right, it was Home. I can't remember who, like, it's a really, yeah.
I think I know what song you're talking about.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me and with us. I understand that. Like this deep, in fact, I sometimes, does it revisit you on I mean, I think it's revisiting you right this moment where we've done the right thing. We've done the thing that we needed to do for ourselves and then as an extension for our loved ones, because when we aren't our true authentic selves, we can't really be what our loved ones need us to be anyway. But that doesn't mean that we don't on occasion have sadness or remorse or just a little heartache left over and mourning what's gone, even though we know that it's right for it to be gone.
Yeah, and that's what I call, any coming out process, but especially for trans folks, and I can only speak from my experience that this has been the mind fuck of being transgender is that I know my coming out just, destroyed the marriage. And it didn't destroy the family, but I mean, it drastically altered the trajectory of our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also happy and I'm living authentically as myself. And the world around me, for the most part, embraces me. I'm very fortunate as a trans person to have that privilege.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it did blow up my family in some regards.
Absolutely. Now, it sounds like your ex-wife has been loving and supportive. How did she react when you first, was she surprised? Or did she always know that you kind of had these other interests?
She said she was surprised and it caught her totally out of left field, and knowing the way the human mind works, especially now with
we see what we want to see, right?
We see what we want to see, and maybe I had some proclivity for wearing a costume here to a public event or Halloween, but that never to her registered as anything more than just my husband's a little weird sometimes.
Did she panic? Was she like, well, all right, we can't do anything about it? Did she try to change you? What did she do?
She panicked, but she also knew that she also gave me the space to do what I needed to do, and in her words, to figure it out. And I did figure it out, and I give her a lot of credit because she could have really dug in to religion and hold on to it even tighter. But she actually went the other way. She found a great therapist who helped her understand LGBTQ issues. She had a great therapist who helped her understand trans folks. And so it really helped her, and she's in a great spot, and she doesn't go to church very much anymore. And now I don't want to say she's drifted away, but she's very much an ally, and she defends me vigorously to her life. I wouldn't say to her life, but but she's one of my biggest defenders and protectors.
I love that. And so in that bio of yours that I read, you still live with her and your children.
Yep.
And is that because the pandemic hit and like where was anybody going to go, or is it by choice to remain a family, and how's that working?
A little bit of all of the above. So I actually, for a short time in late 2019, early 2020, had a partner, and I was living with her for a while. And then about a month before the pandemic, we broke up, and then I moved back in with the family. And then when the pandemic hit, it just made sense for me to stay there. Then I started grad school, and so financially for us to make the household work right now, just so we don't have to support two households, it just makes economic success. But we live our life separately. This weekend is my weekend with the kiddos, and I'll be at home, and she'll come and go, and she has her social life this weekend. Next weekend, that flips, and I'll and all my life. But I will say she's really sweet, and I've been doing an internship this semester, and a lot of mornings she'll be like, "Hey, Amy, do you want some oatmeal? And I'll pack you up a lunch before you leave for your," and so we're still friendly to each other, and we still help each other out where we can. So I'm very fortunate, yeah.
Yeah, that's really magical in so many ways, and so good for your kids. How old are your kids?
My oldest is 19. She actually lives in Buffalo, New York, about an hour away from here, but she comes home a lot on the weekends for food and laundry services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your younger child, is your younger child non-binary?
Yep, our youngest came out as non-binary this year, and so respect their wishes and really.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest with you, and this is embarrassing as a trans person, but making that code switch for them has been hard, and so it's given me a lot of empathy and understanding for people in my life who, like my parents, had known me for almost 70 years, and then I come out and say, "Oops, no, I really am your Amy," and
yeah.
So it's been but we're working on it. We're adjusting, and one of the things I've told them is, no matter where you are, you don't have to settle on a label today for gender, for sexuality. Try things on, see what fits for you, see what doesn't fit, and I want you to know that you and your friends, as you go through high school, will always be welcomed and respected here in our home.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love your honesty and transparency that even though you're trans, the non-binary terminology is tricky. It's hard to rewrite that, and it doesn't match with what we're taught as the English language. So it's confusing and like, I don't know. It's plural, but no, it's not plural. And I don't know how old your youngest kiddo is, but my kids, who range in age from 17 to 8, and especially my younger kids, are so good with pronouns. They're so good at never assuming pronouns until they've been told. They really start with they, them until they actually know what someone's pronouns are. And it's just so inspiring.
Yeah, our youngest, they're 12, and so they're in that same generation, and they have this, we're in a suburban school district just north of Rochester, and they have this nice little queer group of friends around them, and I could never imagine being 12 years old in 1984 and having queer friends.
Well, everyone was hiding or not, not comfortable.
Yep.
Coming out. Yeah. It gives me so much hope and pleasure. I took my kids to 3 of my 4 kids to the Harry Styles concert. We live in Chicago. We drove to Milwaukee for it. And just this week. And it was awesome. I'm a fan. I love Harry Styles. I think he's an incredible role model and a fun musician and talent. And he helped a girl come out in the audience.
Oh, you were at that concert? I just saw that. Oh,
it was so great. In fact, I had my own live recording of it, and it was just so fun. And the audience, when he finally comes back around, he invites this girl to say what she needed to say to her mom herself. And she's really shy, and he was funny about it. He was like, yeah, there are a lot of people here. Did you not know? Did you think through this? Like, are you sure you want to do this? And so he said, no problem. I can do it for you. I'll do it for you. And then he goes back to the other side of the stage. It was a, in the round performance. And the mom's name was Lisa. We've already identified this. He's figured out where she is in the crowd. The camera's on her. Like all the big screens are on the mom. And he says, Lisa, she's gay. And the crowd just erupted. And I thought, this is the future. This is where we're going. And it was all the tears and all the feelings. And for folks like you and me and so many even of our elders who have worked so hard and fought so hard, and it feels really good, doesn't it?
Yeah, that feels really good.
Yeah. All right. So Amy, tell folks about your podcast. And I'm curious, it's called Transformation Thursday. And I'm curious, what led you to starting this podcast?
My undergraduate degree is in radio, TV, film, and I hosted, music shows, talk shows, and did all that stuff on college and commercial radio in the 90s. And so this is really a coming back to my roots kind of thing. And I had a friend of mine, her and I are both trans here in Rochester, and she and I talked about putting a podcast together, and I wanted to make it very trans-focused, and she said, no, I want to make it more about transformation in general. So good news is that we have this broad category of transformation to work with, so we're not limited to trans or LGBTQ issues, but because of the it's me and my new podcast co-host is a cisgender bisexual comedian out of the Vancouver, British Columbia area. We do tend to take in LGBTQ perspectives a lot of times. But, we've talked about radio, we've talked about comedy, we've talked about news, we've talked about politics and transformation. But then, of course, we do spend a lot of time with gender and sexuality as well.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's so impactful to talk about transformation and all of the different ways that we do transform. I love that you left it a little more open-ended because I think it gives people freedom to recognize that they've been through their own transformation or that they want to go through one, and that it takes away that binary concept of there's only one way to transform or one thing you can do to transform. So I think it's fun. Do you enjoy doing the podcast?
Well, I better. We have 109 episodes out as of today, yesterday.
Wow.
In fact. Yeah, so
that's a lot.
That's a big accomplishment in the podcasting world, to get over 100 episodes. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
So, for the first almost 2 years, I did it with my former co-host, Penny Sterling. Penny's a fantastic woman, and the pandemic just put a strain on our relationships. And then over the summer, I was hosting it by myself, but then I clicked with one of my guests. Her name's Natalie Walker. She's my co-host. I actually met her in London doing comedy, and she came back to North America right before the pandemic hit, and we just hit it off, and we started back in September. She joined me as my co-host. In fact, starting here in November now, Canadians can cross into the United States, and she's coming over from Vancouver in a week and a half, and we're going to be doing a comedy show here in Rochester on the 18th of this month. So by the time this comes out, the podcast will be done, because this is the way podcasting works.
That's the way podcasting works, but that's awesome. I love that. Do all of these things that you've done in your life, I mean, you've made some pretty big moves. Does it feel brave?
A friend of mine recently said my parents were commenting to them about how I live my life now is brave and authentic. But to me, it's what other choice do I have?
Yeah, I hear that a lot from my trans friends.
Yeah, and because I left this out in the early part, but in 2017, I had a plan to pull my car into the garage and, take a long permanent nap with some sleeping pills.
Well, but I mean, I guess that's it. There are choices. They were just unacceptable choices to you. Thank goodness. Right.
Yeah,
Thank goodness.
And there was something in my head that said, what would this do to my kids? And then I read some research because I'm a research geek. I read some research on, what I call the legacy of suicide, and it wasn't positive for the survivors and kids of kids of people who take their lives by suicide. So I made that conscious decision not to take my life by suicide and come out and live my life authentically as I am. And that's the best decision and best gift that I could have given my parents, my ex-wife, even though she's my ex now, and my kids.
Absolutely. I believe that. And I would say that to anyone who is struggling in any way with any mental health. It's really brave to stay with us, folks. And the world wants you to stay with us. You can get help. Were there moments where you weren't sure if you were going to make it?
Probably in January and early February 2017. But once I started doing the research and my very logical brain started kicking in, I realized that, no, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be okay. So fortunately, I'd never had an attempt. And I actually have a counseling friend of mine who once told me, she asked me a question. She goes, Amy, why didn't you even make the attempt? I said, well, because there's too much crap in the garage. She's like, Amy, never clean your garage. And to this day, you can't pull a car in my garage.
I kind of love that. I really do. There is support, folks, if you need it. We'll put a mental health support hotline number. I'll open the show with it when I do the pre-roll, and we'll put it in the show notes. If you need support, please get support.
Can I make a request on that?
Of course, yeah.
The Trevor Project is a great one for LGBTQ.
Trans folks.
Yep,
absolutely.
I think there's also the Trans Life Hotline. I hope I'm remembering that, but they're actually one that won't call the police on you unless they have your explicit permission.
That's wonderful. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Amy, I think there's an awful lot to celebrate with you. I love you. I love your energy. I think you're really funny. So I'd like the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to see you as a comic. I think you're just funny as a person, and what you put out. We connect a lot on Twitter, and I enjoy your sense of humor there. And to me, that's an awful lot to celebrate. So I'm curious to hear, how do you like to celebrate?
My favorite celebrations are after my big favorite sets, and I'll send you a link for one. My first set that I did in London in 2019. It's still one of my favorites, even though I'm still a little bit wet behind the ear as a comic. But I love going out and celebrating with a good meal and responsibly having a few adult beverages and enjoying time with my friends.
Yeah, that's a great way to celebrate. And I love this question because there are so many different ways to celebrate. And we can go, oh, I didn't even realize that was celebrating. I'm down with that. That feels good. That's more fun. So,
Yep.
yeah, I love it. Would you share your favorite charitable organization with us, please?
Right now, I lend my support to the Human Rights Campaign.
Me too.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of great work, and especially at the state level, we had their state legislative affairs director on our podcast earlier this year. Gosh darn it, why am I... I'm going to be 50 this winter, so yeah, there's my mind going for you. Oh, she deserves all the credit in the world, because when Texas and these other states start doing the things that they do, she goes out and confronts them. And so it's fantastic. And the Human Rights Campaign is just doing so much right now. And, you know, one of the things that I talk about is we need to unify as an LGBTQ community, as minority groups, you know, and people with less privilege in the world, because when we unite, we win. And when we redivide, our foes take advantage of that more than anybody would ever want. You know, It's not surprising. So if we could find a way to unite, that would be great.
I mean, that's my favorite quote. I love this whole conversation, but when we unite, we win.
Yep.
That's it.
So Kate Oakley from the Human Rights Campaign is their state legislative affairs director, and she does a great job of going out there and fighting with Texas, fighting with Idaho, and taking on these right-wing legislatures. And unfortunately, the I don't want to call them the crazy people, but sometimes, you know, it's, if you read the public opinion polls on LGBTQ acceptance, you know, even with trans folks included, 70% or more of the population supports us. But that 30% on the right are the ones that have the megaphones and the power, and they're the ones doing the damage to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they'll be our charity of the week. We will give them some love on social media. And I always ask my listeners to do what you can, whether it's time, money, shares, making sure people know what the effort is and what the work is. But they're an incredible organization. It's one of the several organizations that I also support on a monthly basis. So love that we have that in common. Amy, will you share your 3 words with us one last time?
They are vulnerable, courageous, empath.
Yeah, we didn't even get it. Obviously, I think you're incredibly vulnerable and courageous. We didn't even get into the fact that you're an empath. That's a whole conversation too. When did you know you were an empath?
After I transitioned.
Really?
Yeah. That's when it really became apparent.
I'm an empath, and I have one daughter who is like a hardcore empath. She feels all the feelings and all the things, even I think from animals and other living things around her, and learning to use that as a superpower and a strength. Have you learned to use it as a superpower and a strength, and not to because it just takes her out?
That's one of the things that lends me so well to counseling, but I've also learned that I also need to take time during counseling to process my thoughts, to move them out, and I'm finding that journaling does that very well. That making sure that I write my notes and get everything entered into the computer just moves it from my brain through my fingers.
I love that. It's a great takeaway for the empaths who are listening. If you don't already journal, it just sort of is a really great way to process all of the things and all of the feelings. Amy, you have been a lot of fun. I am so honored and grateful that you came and you were so vulnerable with us, and that we got to have some really special moments with you. I enjoy
I enjoy being your social friend. I look forward to continuing to grow that relationship. And thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Heather. Have a wonderful weekend.
Absolutely. You too. All right, listeners, I hope that you loved this as much as I did. If you have questions or you want to connect, Amy, what's the best way for folks to reach you?
Just looking for me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at TransThursPod, P-O-D.
Excellent. So, and guys, go take a listen to the Transformation Thursday podcast. You can find that wherever you're listening to this podcast. I'd love to know what you think of this show or any of our other episodes. You can email me directly at heather@vickeryandco.com or find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm at Vickery and Co. I respond personally and directly to everybody. If you like the show, tell friends about it. That's the best thing you can do. You can subscribe, like, rate, and review. That's fun. We as podcasters, we really appreciate that. But mostly what I want you to do is share it with other people and help grow the audience, because we're out here doing the work. And I love sharing brave journeys with you. Thank you for being here. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. This is Heather Vickery reminding you today and every single day to go out and choose bravely. Bye. Hey friends, I want to share something really exciting with you. We already know you enjoy listening to podcasts because you're listening to this one, but I'm also betting you enjoy audiobooks. And hey, listen, if you don't already enjoy audiobooks, then it's time to check them out. That's why I'm really excited to share Libro.fm with you. They are an incredible new platform for listening to audiobooks. And by choosing Libro.fm over other audiobook services, you are supporting a local bookstore of your choice and investing in your local community. Libro.fm offers over 150,000 audiobooks via their primary platform, which, by the way, they built with love and from scratch because they're a small business also. They even offer bookseller recommendations for great audiobook options. You can sign up right now via www.vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. That's vickeryandco.com/LIBROFM. And when you do, you'll get one free audiobook of your choice, and the proceeds will go to your favorite local bookstore. Now, check what I just said there. You're going to get a free book, and the proceeds are still going to go to your local bookstore because Libro.fm makes sure that their booksellers get paid even when they give a promo to customers. I've listened to over 20 audiobooks this year alone. I especially love listening to memoirs read by the author, and it feels great knowing that all of my purchases support my local bookstore, The Book Table, in Oak Park, Illinois. Libro.fm. The same audiobooks, the same price, but a completely different story. Check them out right now at vickeryandco.com/LibroFM. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Maybe you've had this thought and then quickly shut it down because who has the time? Or you don't know how, or gosh, it just all seems too hard. If you have something to share with the world, we want to encourage you to get your message out. The world needs to hear it. Did you know that 50% of all homes are podcast fans? If you've ever wondered about having your own podcast or how it can increase your business or get your message across, then please join me and the other experts from the Podcast Power Academy for our monthly free Q&A session. It's called So You Want to Start a Podcast? This casual live conversation will help you understand how podcasting can be a great decision, why now is the best time to get started, and how to get into action with it. Visit podcastpoweracademy.com to learn more. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories of people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes and full episode transcripts, or to get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we would love to know what you think of the show. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely.
This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching. Coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music was created and produced in a custom collaboration with Matt Lewis from ML Creative Consulting, a boutique firm dedicated to helping clients identify their unique sound and amplify their brand with custom delivered soundtracks. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to everyone on Team Brave, from our producers, associate producers, copy editors, writers, and support team. Special thanks to Molly, Mary, Kim, Sabra, and Sabrina. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.